They want something simple that they spend so much time on their sale and on building the rapport with their merchant that they don't want to have any problems or any long experiences when they have to just install the equipment or drop the equipment.
Hey, James, that was a great interview we had with Lori today, right? I mean, this whole idea of terminals versus POS systems. I think we've been so imbued in talking about POS systems for the last several years, or at least the last year or two, that we've kind of ignored that there's still a big market out there for terminals, which Lori is going after.
Well, and there's not only a big market, but there's innovation, right? There's new things happening. And so for those of you that, if you place credit card terminals, you're going to want to listen to this. It's actually pretty interesting. Some of the really cool advances in that way. And then I dive into questions from the field, and I've just had quite a few conversations lately around mindset. And so it's very practical. It's not fluff because that's just not who I am, but I talk about the practical side of having a positive mindset and how that kind of comes across or should come across in a sales context. And then Patti, I thought your insiders was really interesting today. So tell us about that a little bit.
We talked about, Intuit's latest play to try to undercut the ISO market and what ISOs can do to make sure that doesn't happen.
Love it. So before we dive into this one, I do want to mention that Lori and HipFinity, that is a paid sponsor, not only for myself doing some consulting work with them and partnering with them in that way, making training videos and all that, but also a sponsor of the podcast. And so this podcast is sponsored by HipFinity. We're very proud of that. We love, one of my favorite things, Patti, is finding companies. I usually have about 5 or 6, maybe 7 that I'm working with where I'm like, this is something pretty cool that they have to offer.
I think it is. Yes.
And that's the case with HipFinity. And so I've been talking to a lot of ISOs and like, James, they have some issues with the smaller, medium ISOs on support and all these different things with terminal. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So HipFinity is a paid sponsor, but with that in mind, let's dive into this interview with Lori. Hey, everybody. Patti and I are here today with Lori Pagnozzi. She is the CEO and Chief Disruptor over at a new company called HipFinity. How are you doing today, Lori?
Good. Great, James. How are you?
I am doing fantastic.
Hey, Patti.
Hey, nice to see you, Lori.
You too.
Yeah, so we're really excited today to talk about something we don't talk about nearly enough, and that is the credit card terminal. So in our industry, a lot of people are like, oh, we got to talk about point of sale. We got to talk about tablet POS and all that. And yet at the same time, there are thousands and thousands, really tens of thousands of these terminals that are being placed on a monthly basis throughout the US. And so today we're going to talk about advancements that have been made there and what both ISOs and merchants are looking for from a credit card machine, from a credit card terminal, with HipFinity being the newest entrant into that market and providing a really unique solution there. So before we dive into all that though, Lori, I'd love to get your story to our audience. So give us a little flavor of how you got into this crazy industry and kind of your journey to where you're at today.
Oh, wow. Sure. Well, so I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My journey started like another lifetime ago, it feels like, in the card issuing space. So I worked for Chase Manhattan Bank NA back when it was Chase Manhattan Bank NA in the card issuing space. And then that was a time where a lot of the banks were merging and acquiring one another. And there was a lot of acquisitions going on. And so I found myself from there being recruited to a payment solution provider. So I went from issuing to providing solutions to ISOs and acquirers. So it was like the other side of how things worked. And so I worked there. I actually worked for a very successful, at that time, and again, I'm going back, it was, there were 3 main providers, I would say, in my opinion. There was Verifone, Littman, which is who I worked for, and then Hypercom. Those were the 3 names at the time. Yeah. So after years of working with Littman successfully in the Nereid product line, they were bought by Verifone. So there was an acquisition there by Verifone to Littman. And so then after that, I was asked to be a partner and a founder of a brand new solution provider company, and kind of do everything that had been done at Littman, kind of go in and do this all again, and with lots of different technology on the way. So I did that, and that was in 2006, and I stayed there 17 years, built a great company, good products, good people over at Deja Vu Systems. And so last year, I found myself in a position in my journey and in my career where my vision was slightly different, where I wanted to be more of a solution provider that was for the ISO, for the agent, with them in mind, knowing all of those years of what their pain points are and what their wish list is, knowing that I would be able to deliver that to them and be more of an extension of their sales and their success. And that's when HipFinity was born.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. I love your background going all the way from the issuing side. And I actually didn't know about the Lippmann thing. That's interesting. I actually, back when I started, I sold a lot of Nerit terminals. I'm dating myself a little bit now, but I was selling those. And probably for the first like 6-8 months in the business, I was selling, the Nerit and then the Hypercom, T7s and stuff back then. So
yeah, it was wild. And usually I lose people and when I say chemical bank, that's when they look at me like, who? But,
who was chemical? Who was Manny Hanny?
Yeah, manufactured Hanover and all that stuff. Yeah, but it's been an incredible ride, and and then that was where I had met my colleagues when we started. Deja Vu was from the Lippmann team.
That's so cool.
That went really well, and now HipFinity is the new vision and the new journey that I'm on, and I feel really, really good about it.
That's fantastic. I love the story. Yeah. So, again, I alluded to this earlier, but I want to get your thoughts on this. I mean, when we talk to payments people today, you go to the regional shows or the ETA, Transact or whatever, and, there's not a lot of people that are, talking about credit card terminals. A lot of times it's, point of sale, it's integrated this, it's integrated that. But what are you seeing as somebody that's had a lot of years of experience and now dealing with ISOs with this new company, placing terminals, all of that? How do you feel about the, placement of terminals and that market over the next 12 to 24 months? Like, where do you see this going?
It's still a very big market. And I know when I talk to clients and I talk to ISOs and colleagues at these shows, that the thought is that terminals are no more, terminals are going away.
Right.
And even if that's so, and that's the progression of our space, the sales are here right now. They're not going away tomorrow. That whether it's a standalone, it's a gateway, it's a semi-integrated, the device is still required. The card present device is still there. It's not required. It's popular,
right?
As opposed to like a phone or a tap on glass. It's popular to place a terminal. I should say, not required. It's a card vehicle for somebody a consumer to tap their card or insert their card. So I think that for right now, there are thousands and thousands of terminals a month that are being sold and being bought. So the market is definitely not going away tomorrow.
Right. And there's millions of merchants out there. So, we know that they're not all on POS systems.
Right. And they like the simplicity for especially the brick and mortar. They like the simplicity of a standalone or terminal. If they need something more robust, then typically they are going to a semi-integrated type solution to the terminal.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think? I mean, what's been your experience in terms of what ISOs are looking for in terms of terminal placement experience? And what are some of the pain points that they're facing?
Okay. So in my experience, and I worked with a lot of ISOs, from the big super ISOs to the smaller office ISOs, they want and what they need is just reliable, easy to use, easy to install. Mm-hmm. They want something simple that they spend so much time on their sale and on building the rapport with their merchant that they don't want to have any problems or any long experiences when they have to just install the equipment or drop the equipment. They want to be able to plug it in. They want it to be programmed easily. They want to train their merchant and they want to move on to their next sale. Mm-hmm. They don't want to spend a lot of time getting phone calls back and forth because it's either not easy to use or it's not as reliable as they want it to be, or they can't find stuff. So a very simple install, something that's going to work, that's reliable, that they're not going to have to go back and forth with their merchant after finally closing the deal after however many months or weeks or whatever it took them to build that rapport with the merchant.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to share an interesting experience before my next question, Lori. So like a week or so ago, I started working with HipFinity a few months back, and we've been going through the terminal stuff. And so I was shooting some videos last week, and I had Lori with me on this Zoom. And of course, I've seen every terminal out there. I've done videos on every terminal that exists, basically. And so I was like, hey, we're checking out the dual pricing functionality and some of this kind of stuff. So she's making this change on the back end, and she's like, I see her clicking like update. and the terminal sitting in front of me from HipFinity, and it dings, like I got a text or something, and I was like, what was that? And she's like, that was the update.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm so used to you make a change. And then I was like amazed when I saw the technology a few years ago where you could like actually click a button on the terminal and like do a download, from a change that you made on the back end. And it was like, wow, that seemed pretty cool. It takes like 5 minutes to reboot the terminal, but it was nice that it, you know what I mean? I could do that without having, but then it was just like, ding, didn't restart.
Yeah.
Then it just updated.
It's instant. It's almost instant.
Yeah.
And that goes back to your question about pain points.
Right.
So that's what the ISO wants. The pain points that they have, I addressed with the push instead of a pull. So on a typical install, what you'll see in the industry is that the terminal will initiate the download, the software download, whether it's a software update, which is always going to be software update to meet new requirements, new features added. So whether you're pulling that update from a server or you're changing the merchant configuration, they wanted to add a feature, change a feature, you still have to do update what their existing payment software is. So a typical install, in my experience in the past, is a download, where the terminal is always initiating to the server and saying, is there anything new for me to pull? And then pulling that information to the terminal software. So what HipFinity does is a push. So as I change that configuration or I add that new software, I'm simply clicking on submit, and the portal is sending that data and that update directly to the terminal. And that was the ding that you heard. So the pain point there is that the ISO, when they have to do mass updates, there's some kind of a new requirement. And so everybody updates their software. Instead of having to touch every single device or having to walk a merchant through button presses and schedule that, and I've seen it because I've in years of working with it, it's a process. They have to use resources and schedule time with the right person to stand in front of the terminal. And then they have to do it for each device that's in the merchant store. So this is a much simpler solution. The merchant doesn't even need to be there. The merchant you just have to press submit, and the merchant just has to have their terminal connected to the internet. That's it. And it doesn't go to a marketplace or a market. It goes right to the payment software. So there's no need to touch or walk anybody through any button process.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the other thing I thought of after we were talking, Lori, is I'm like, wow, the other big thing is a lot of ISOs I talk to, they like being able to make their own changes. They'll go into the back office and do stuff. And, when they do that, they then are like on the phone with the merchant. And they're like, okay, now click this button. And they're like, okay. And then they will sit there on the phone with this merchant for like 5 to 7 minutes because it has to reboot. And then they got to like run a test transaction or whatever, whereas with this, it's like, in just a second, you're going to hear a ding. And then it's like, I heard the ding. You're all set. Have a great day.
Right.
I mean,
and sometimes you get your, there's always the possibility when you're doing a download of getting an error message.
Right.
And so then then there's more button presses and more tests and your merchants can get very frustrated, and that frustrates the ISO. And so it sounds like maybe it's a little thing, but it's really not. It's actually a larger thing, especially if there's a software update that's required.
Yes.
And so it has to be done. So even in what the industry would call an auto update today, typically what that just means is there's some kind of a timer, or there's some kind of a trigger at the terminal where it would still initiate the download from the server, at a certain time or a certain event. So what HipFinity does is it's actually an instant auto update, and it's not just software; it's remote keyloads, over-the-air keyloads as well. So you don't have to have the terminal pull anything; it's being pushed, whether it's a P2P encryption, a debit bank key encryption. It's all being pushed from the portal.
I love it. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. So on the same line, one other question I have on kind of this ISO side. So like, when we think about the needs of the ISO, one of the big things is support to the merchant, right? So talk a little bit about this, because I think a lot of people don't fully understand this idea of kind of level 1 support, level 2, et cetera. And like, how does that work? And how does HipFinity, how are you positioned in the market maybe differently than competitors? Talk a little bit about this.
Sure. So there are two levels of support, and they're level 1 and level 2. What that means is level 1 is the first point of contact. Level 2 is typically an escalation or, a more complicated issue that requires a more experienced or knowledgeable, representation. So the way that the market that I've seen in my experience and the way that it kind of moved to is that providers don't necessarily want to use their resources, do level 1 support. They want the ISO, or in a lot of cases, the super ISO, to do their own level 1 support and then come to them with the exceptions, with the escalations,
Right.
because they feel like the ISO should be able to support or should be supporting their own merchant, and they don't want to have that relationship, that first level of contact relationship. And for, like I said, that's primarily you're talking about the super ISO, the larger ISO, who has those resources and has that infrastructure to be able to say, I can do my level 1 support in-house. But that, to me, leaves a whole section of mid to smaller ISOs who don't have that infrastructure, who can't do that level 1 support. And as we just talked about, they want a reliable, easy to use, easy to install terminal. They don't want to be tech support reps to their merchants. And it's not that they can't, I'm sure they could, but it's just not, it puts them at a disadvantage to not have that level 1 support at their disposal. So I feel like there's an opportunity there. And that's who, and I think that the super ISOs, they work really well with that infrastructure. Right. But I think that it's a big missed opportunity not to be able to service the ISOs, those feet on the street who are going into the merchant locations, who are building this relationship with their merchants, and not be able to support them and be an extension of them. Whereas a lot of times when I was working with those mid to smaller ISOs, you would hear them say, let me get my guys on the phone. Let me get my desk on the phone. And so it's a representation of that ISO, of that person, that salesperson saying, let me get my desk on the phone. And so they need that service, that extension, so that the merchant feels like this is part of their service from their ISO, not from their terminal provider, but right from their sale, from that. It helps enhance that relationship with the ISO. And I think that's what the ISO opportunity is. And I think that there's a want and a desire for it as well.
Yeah, I think it's what you're talking about almost is like the ISO providing white glove service, right?
Correct. And it goes back to, times have changed so much, but I told you about a little bit about my journey. And in the beginning of my journey, there was an emphasis on that. Let's get back to sales 101, right? Find the pain points and the need, and then be an extension, do training. We used to go out and do trainings, and HipFinity is going to do a lot more of that. Again, we want to do more training. We want to do one-on-one support. If you need a HipFinity salesperson to guide you to close your sale, we're there to help you do that. Because it's my belief, guys, that as a payment provider, there's a lot of us out there, right? You can, an ISO has their choice. And that's important to remember all the time. They have a choice of who they place and what products they use and services. It's what's going to make you stand out. What's going to make that ISO want to continue to do business with you is the fact that you're there to support them while they're placing your product. And I think I've heard over and over again in the past year, as I'm meeting with clients, that just doesn't happen in the industry as much anymore. It's hard to get somebody to answer the phone for an ISO.
Well, I'll tell you the other thing I just want to follow up on that real quick is, you have this other problem where, I mean, let's face it, most of the small medium ISOs today, it's not like it used to be where they had like this one provider. Most of them have multiple providers, and it's really annoying because they're, I'm a small ISO, I've got 300 mids, let's say, right? Maybe 500, whatever, right? I'm selling 10, 15 a month. Well, when I go out there and I get a merchant that reaches out, hey, I have a need, I have a question. It's like, well, who do I even reach out to? I have 3 different, I'm working with First Data, TSYS, and right. And it's like, well, how long is the whole time going to be? And so what this does, and one of the reasons I like this idea when we talked originally, is kind of like, it's a very unique structure because you're actually bundling the merchant support with the terminal provider. which I think makes a lot more sense for a lot of small ISOs to have one terminal provider, you know, one tech stack that they have to learn as far as the terminal goes in the back office and all that. But in order to really make that efficient, you then also kind of need the support to run through that for the terminal, rather than having one terminal that is supported by 5 different companies.
What you need is, and what HipFinity offers is ownership. We want to take ownership of that situation and support that ISO. So if I need if my team needs to get TSYS on the line, then they'll do that, instead of telling them. And everybody's been in this position where unless you're Class A certified through TSYS, which is not heard of a lot these days. So everybody's put in this position where they're told call TSYS. The merchant's told to call TSYS. TSYS isn't supporting it because it's not Class A. So TSYS will say, you know, we don't support that product, and then you get pushed back to the payment provider. So what HipFinity does is take ownership of it. And if TSYS does need a phone call, we're more than happy to facilitate with the ISO, so that everybody is aware of what the situation is, and the situation can get resolved without anybody bouncing back and forth. And there's one point of contact, one resolution.
Right. Yeah, that's really key.
You know,
so I'm interested, Lori, in merchant, kind of go back to the merchant again, and just get an idea for what kind of merchants would be a good fit for a standalone terminal. And has this changed over, say, the last 10 years? Has this, you know, criteria?
Well, and I think yes, it has changed. There are merchants who want the more robust POS system, and we've seen a lot of these POS systems now great POS systems become enterprise POS systems. So I think that has changed. However, I think that there is still a very strong brick and mortar standalone terminal market, and whether it's moving that to gateway. I think gateway is becoming more and more a norm these days as well. But I think that the merchant that wants more than gateway reporting or all the features and functionality of a gateway or a standalone terminal, you will see them move to a small or a medium-sized POS system. But there's definitely, for the brick and mortar mom and pop businesses, the pizzerias, a lot of the pizzerias, bagel shops that are these mom
Spoken like a New Yorker. Bagel shops and pizzerias,
delis, small bodega retails, lots of different types of MCCs.
Sort of like the traditional.
Right. I haven't seen a lot of change in that space. So there is definitely, like I said, thousands of terminals a month are being sold just on standalone. So there definitely is a need for it, and there definitely is a market for it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is, so much of this comes back to like the preferences of the merchant. You know, these are people, a lot of times I think, in the kind of payment tech space, we talk about, verticals, and I'm guilty of this as well as anybody else. We talk about verticals as if they're all the same. Like, well, let me tell you what pizza shops want.
Right.
Well, I can't tell you what pizza shops want, because there's owners of these pizza shops, and some of them are very tech savvy and they want to have this incredibly robust system. Others, they don't want a rocket ship to land on their counter today. They actually just want to be able to take a card payment, and they don't want to mess with the point of sale system. And I've seen that a big time in the auto repair, tire and lube places. Like, there's just a lot of businesses where, even though we might think, oh my goodness, I can't believe this business doesn't have a point of sale system. What are they thinking? Well, what they're thinking is, they don't like having a point of sale system. They want it to be really
simple. And not everybody likes change, right? So they don't like to change the way they do things. I had an ISO last month that his merchant was busy bagel shops, 3 busy bagel shops on the Jersey Shore.
Yeah.
And they had a way that they did things.
Right.
And that's the way. He didn't want to look at the transaction portal and view his reports. We made it so that the report printed out of the terminal. He didn't want his accounting manager to be able to look at the portal at the reports, because that's not how they do it. They take the batch report and they walk it down the block to their accounting manager's office, and that's how they do it, and that's how they want to keep doing it. And so they did. I mean, obviously we configured that for them, but it's a difference between what he runs. I mean, he was doing tremendous volume.
Right.
And he had enough to worry about, enough to think about, and he couldn't change his process at that point.
Right.
And he'd been doing it for years and didn't want to change his process. This was working.
Yeah.
And then you have the merchant who says, you know, well, I don't want to do it this way. It's like archaic to me. I want a bigger, more technologies on my side. I want to be able to look at the reports. I want to see the graphs. I want to be able to sort it by, you know, different filters. And so it is about choice, you know, and it's not about business so much as it's about the business person.
Yeah, I agree. And I love the way you started off the interview that we were just talking about, like, you know, is there a trend towards businesses adopting more technology and maybe getting away from a standalone terminal, at least in isolation, right? We see the semi-integration, but is that trend happening? Obviously, we all acknowledge that. Of course, that trend's happening. The question is, how quickly is it happening? And I think when you're looking at the small business market, guess what? If for those of you that haven't been around for a while, like the three of us, small business owners tend to change very, very slowly. And there's this like never-ending long tail effect of, you know, businesses that just don't want to change. And so the question is, are you really going to bang your head against the wall and try to, well, you got to get up, you know, if you're not going to buy a Clover from me today, then I'm not going to sell you. Really? Like, why don't you just place a terminal if that's what they want? You know what I mean?
Think of it this way. There are still plenty of merchants out there that use modem in their terminal that don't want to upgrade to a Wi-Fi or an Ethernet, and they still don't want to go away from phone line transactions. So you still have that's how long it takes
that tail is
and adapt newer technology and newer ways to do
right.
Well, Lori,
I think your bagel shop is the perfect example of that, right?
I mean, absolutely. They physically walk that report at the end of the day down to accounting, where all their accounting manager would have to just log in.
Right.
And they have everything at their disposal, but that's not how they do it.
But if this has been working for 30 years, why change it?
And I'm not going to, and the ISO felt the same way. We're not going to try and convince him to change something that works for him for all these years. And 3 very successful bagel shops.
But there are some people out there, I think we all know, you know, it's like, oh, this is this really cool new technology. You really have to have it. And if you don't have it, you're an idiot. Oh,
sure. But you know what? For those people, I always say anything can be done.
Yes.
Anything can be done. I don't think the majority of the mid to small ISOs want or need all of that technology.
Right.
But if they want it, it's available, and anything can be done. HipFinity, you know, specializes in integrations as well. We have multiple ways to integrate, you know, POS solutions and third-party solutions through our APIs or embedded SDK. So it can be done. It's just I find most of the medium to small ISOs, they also have a great need for terminal.
Yeah,
I agree.
Well, Lori, this has been fascinating. Obviously, we can go on talking for a long time about all of this. I would love to. I'm sure that between the three of us, we could share some very interesting stories from the last, you know, decade or so.
Oh yeah.
You know, of terminals and their evolution. But what I would love to do is, so to clarify here, we're talking about small to medium ISOs who are currently placing a lot of terminals, or they're placing some terminals, and they're interested in learning more about HipFinity to become their terminal provider of choice, or at least to try it out and see what they think of the kind of combination of support and the push versus pull and all the things we discussed today. So for those individuals that want to reach out, where would you send them to learn more?
They can go to our website, which is hipfinity.co. They can email our sales team, which is sales@hipfinity.co. Or we also have a support team, which is the Hipline. So it's hipline@hipfinity.co. Or they can call me directly, or call the HipFinity toll-free number, which I can give to you, and you can
we'll put it. Yeah.
Okay, and just so our HipFinity, spell that for us so that people can.
Sure, it's HIP, like hip, like always in the know and always up the next trend, and FINITY, HipFinity.
So hipfinity.co. Lori, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate you sharing your insights and experience with us.
Thank you. Thank you both. It's been a pleasure.
That's been great. Thank you.
So Patti, today I want to talk about mindset when we're out selling. And this is not my normal segment. You know, I'm not the fluff rah guy. That's not really my thing.
No.
So you probably didn't realize that about me, Patti, but I'm much more the kind of like very practical. Let me give you some tips on how to do this. But What I have realized lately, as I've been dealing with salespeople and trying to get them, going and training them and working with ISOs, is that, I am just a extremely positive person. Probably I know for sure to a fault. Like my business partner that I never really talk about that much, Jack. Hello, Jack. He listens to the episode every week.
Hi, Jack.
Yeah, Jack is, he offsets me really well in this area, meaning he's generally tends towards being more pessimistic and cautious. And I tend to be extremely optimistic. And I just feel like it's all going to work out great. Here, let's go. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but having said that, in sales, right? In sales, you do need to be in a very positive mindset because it is a practical thing when you're talking about sales. If you're not in a positive mindset, several things are going to happen to you. Okay. Number one, first thing that's going to happen is the prospects are going to notice that you don't seem confident.
Right.
And you're going to come across as desperate. You're going to come across, in that way. And then the other thing that's going to happen is if you don't have this like faith, like, oh, I'm going to get the sale and I'm going to help this merchant, then you start to get wishy-washy. You're not real strong on the solutions that you're going to provide. And you're not coming in there as this, this expert. But you could even go back further in the sales process, Patti, to the biggest issue with a lack of positivity. And that is that you just don't ever go prospecting in the first place.
Well, that's it. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You just like, oh, I'm just sitting home. I mean, if I'm not going to make any sales, why would I go
watch
out
YouTube videos all day? Exactly.
And next thing you know, you're going to be working at a cubicle somewhere because, you didn't get it done. Right. So what I would tell you is a couple of things. Number one is you need to establish and kind of reverse engineer yourself to establish what puts you in a positive mindset and what puts you in a negative mindset. Right. For me, there are certain, I'm a big Tony Robbins guy, right? I'm all about Tony Robbins. I'll even throw in a little Joel Osteen if I just need to get a little bit, I'm a Christian. So he'll be like,
a brush, right?
He's like, the very like overly positive. It's like you're drinking honey or something. But, but again, have these people, a lot of people I talk to, it's, Grant Cardone or it's David Goggins or other people. It's a certain music they listen to that gets them going, but whatever it is, you got to figure out what is that thing that puts you into this kind of unstoppable mindset where you're like, hey, I'm positive. Here we go. We're going to make this happen. So figure out what that is and then make a habit of doing that. Okay. You got to put that stuff into place, especially when you notice yourself being in a negative mindset. If you get started with your day and, you have your morning routine, well, even after your morning routine and you've gone into 5, 6, 7 businesses and they've all told you no, or you've made 15 cold calls and you don't have any appointments yet, the most efficient thing you can do at that point is to stop for 15 minutes and get into a positive mindset. So again, you're listening to that video or whatever. And so the reason I was thinking about this, Patti, is because this literally happened to me today. So my wife and I, we just have been running like crazy the last few weeks, super busy, haven't had a lot of time to spend just relaxing or anything like that. And I've just recently taken on some new things. And so, today we both got up and I got up at like 5, she got up at 5:30 and we were both just like exhausted. And we just were like, oh man, like what in the world? And she's going to school to teach and I'm coming here to run the business. And, I got here and I spent about an hour in meetings. And then I just was like, realized, you know what, I don't have it. Like, I don't have it today. Right. So I went out, I drove over, got myself a fruit smoothie. And in this case, I went to Joel Osteen. I put on my 10-minute video talking about, are you letting negative thoughts into your mind and how to protect and be positive and have faith and all this stuff. And then I grabbed the link and I shared it with Christina. And because I knew she was driving to school, she listened to it on the way. And by the time she got to school, she's texting me, oh, I feel so much better. I'm ready to go. And I was like, I am too. I'm ready to go. I'm going to go record a podcast. And so I literally just went through that a little bit ago because, you got to be in that positive mindset.
You do. Yeah. Yeah.
So just all I would tell you is you need to be in a positive mindset. And so you need to have that awareness. So figure out, number one, what is it that gets you in a positive mindset, right? What do you need to listen to? What do you need to experience? Who do you need to, there's people I talk to. I have several mentors where one guy individual, Josh Bryan is his name. Nobody would know him on this podcast, but I worked with him a long time ago and he's a very, very successful guy and just so positive. If I find myself really getting into a bad place where I'm like, man, I don't know, I give him a call and he always answers my call. And he's always like, James, man, like you got this, like this is going to be huge. You're going to be so successful. Like he's just so positive. It's infectious. So have these tactics and then know when to use the tactics. Know yourself. Don't allow yourself to be the victim. Don't allow yourself. Maybe you're listening to this podcast right now and you're feeling like down in the dumps and this is not going to work.
Right.
Like, realize that's just in your mind and change your mindset.
Well, here's something also that I do.
Yeah.
And I do it in many aspects of my life, but it could help, I think, as well, is when I'm going into a situation that I'm not quite sure about, maybe, maybe it's somebody I have, issues with, or maybe it's, just the subject,
Right.
I sit and I conjure up in my mind something, an experience in the past that made me really happy.
Yes.
Okay. And then I relive that happiness experience and go for what I need. So I could see, in a sales situation, sitting in the car, thinking about maybe, how you helped how that one merchant was so pleased with what you got them, and just carry that positivity with you into the sales call.
Yeah, what you just described, there's actually a really good Tony Robbins video I'd highly recommend for those of you if you want to try something interesting tomorrow morning. Go on YouTube and just look for Tony Robbins priming. And it's like a 14-15 minute video experience where he is going through and like you just said, Patty, you close your eyes and you imagine these incredible moments in your life and you think about them and you kind of like you're reliving that. And anyway, it's this whole process. But yeah, I think that's so good. You get yourself into that positive mindset and you're able to go out there and accomplish something and get something done. So hey, everybody,
stuff, James. Thanks.
Try something new tomorrow. Get yourself in a positive mindset. You're just going to enjoy your life a lot better. If for nothing, no other reason, just do that. You're going to be happy. That's a good thing, right? That's a win by itself. So hopefully it works.
So James, Intuit, the company that, is behind QuickBooks, the accounting software you hate to love.
That's funny. You either hate to love it or love to hate it. I'm not sure.
Exactly. Right. But
depends on the day.
It depends, yes. So it's out to embed itself further into the financial lives of small businesses with a new service it's calling QuickBooks Money.
Yes.
Now, when I brought this up with you just the other day, I mean, I thought this was really interesting when I saw this announcement because it seems to be pretty much what Nativia is doing.
Right. With Nativia
which
banking,
is one of our sponsors.
Yep.
But I also think it makes it even more evident that ISOs and agents need to be able to offer these kinds of capabilities to their merchants, because if they're not, they're gonna lose the game. They're gonna have to sense. A lot of businesses, myself included, small businesses are really weary of Intuit's fee creep. I started with QuickBooks, maybe 15 years ago, and it was maybe $50 to $100 a year. Now it's like $600 a year, and there's all kinds of other fees that are always in there.
Yep. And that's just the QuickBooks. Then you start adding in if you do your payment processing through them, and now you can do banking services.
And then they take like 4%. No, it's over 3% that they're taking. But So here's what they're planning. It's an all-in-one electronic payments and banking solution with no monthly fees or balance requirements and a debit card to access the money. In a press release, QuickBooks said QuickBooks Money targets small businesses that don't necessarily need a full range of financial management and accounting tools that comes with a full-blown QuickBooks, but they want a simple tool that helps them get paid, manage money end to end. And of course, the hope is that as these businesses grow, they'll eventually sign on for the full-blown QuickBooks.
Right.
Features include invoicing and payment requests for ACH, PayPal, Apple Pay, or Venmo. Same-day funding to FDIC insured accounts. 1.75% interest on account balances, which is way above the national average.
Right.
They said, we believe this is a true front door to the future of small business success. So I know we talk about this a lot in our commercials, but I just thought I would do some comparisons of what they're offering. And, since I just showed you what they're offering, here's what Nativia Banking includes. Cashback business debit cards, automated connections to external bank accounts, secure QuickBooks integration, fast funding on card receivables, the ability to create multiple accounts, virtual debit cards, and authorize users to manage cash flow, competitive rates on account balances, residuals on banking services.
Which one thing I want to jump in there. I mean, the interest rate on accounts, so that's something they negotiate per ISO, depending on,
Right.
because it's up to it's the ISO's program, right?
Right.
But I can tell you the 1.75% is actually not that high.
It's not.
That's something the TV would be able to match it. Again, depending on what they're doing, but it's a very similar
Right.
thing. So,
And I think it's also important, that, you're getting what the TV is offering ISOs is the ability to earn residuals on banking services,
which is obviously the big difference.
a big difference, and instant commissions.
Right. So, yeah, it's yeah, I love it, Patty. I think what's so interesting about this is what this basically, if you zoom out and look at the larger trend, you're going to have these companies right now, Stripe, Square, and Intuit. These are the three big ones, in my opinion. And when you look at them, what are they all trying to do? Well, they're all trying to do these gateway services, and where they make so much of their money is on payment processing, just like all of us do in this industry, right? And so we're all in the same boat in that way. But what they're doing is they're recognizing that by offering banking services, by offering access to capital, by offering these different things, they're pulling in business owners that they otherwise wouldn't get.
Right.
And then they're stealing the payment processing.
Exactly.
And so you need to be offering these services to your merchants so that you can protect them,
and
from
protect
that.
yourself.
Exactly. Protect your residuals, right? Because that's it. Protect that account is what I'm saying. Because if you don't protect your account, you're going to lose it. I mean, Intuit is incredibly good at what they're doing right now.
Yeah, they are. And like I say, they have a captive audience, really.
They do. Absolutely. So yeah, if you want to make residual income, you got to go through like an Activia banking, you got to go through somebody that's going to offer banking services and has that ISO relationship, because Intuit doesn't have that.
Right.
Yeah. So good stuff, Patty. Very cool.
Sure.